With horror fans currently showing Heart Eyes quite a bit of love, there might be no better time to shed some light on the largely forgotten Lover's Lane. Featuring Anna Faris in her first appearance in a full-length film, Lover's Lane was made in 1999 and released commercially on VHS the following year. And while Lover's Lane certainly didn't achieve anything close to Heart Eyes' positive reviews, it still makes for an interesting companion piece. A basic summary of Lover's Lane would reveal notable similarities to Heart Eyes' ending, as well as both films' choice of murder targets, but it's actually the differences between the two films that make them interesting to look at side by side. There's even a noteworthy contrast between Anna Faris' career and that of a particular member of Heart Eyes' cast. But even without diving that far into the film, most casual viewers will immediately notice a key similarity in each movie's basic premise. Heart Eyes and Lover's Lane both feature Seattle-based Valentine's killers targeting couples. They even target one couple each in similar locations. Sarah Lancaster as Chloe and Riley Smith as Michael in Lover's Lane. Much like HEK in Heart Eyes, the hook from Lover's Lane begins the movie by attacking a couple on Valentine's Day. The police quickly make an arrest, but he escapes 13 years later to strike again. Since the hook initially targets couples at the titular hookup spot, this leads to at least one attack quite similar to HEK's memorable killing at the drive-in movie in Heart Eyes. But, much like HEK, the hook does quite quickly move on to kill several non-coupled people who are simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's somewhat interesting that both movies also set their couple killers in Seattle, although viewers familiar with the area might not find it very recognizable in either film. Part of this is because Heart Eyes was actually shot in New Zealand instead of Washington. But while Lover's Lane was shot on location, its use of primarily suburban shooting locations means that those who have only visited Seattle as tourists probably won't be able to differentiate it from any other city. Lover's Lane and Heart Eyes use the same killer identity reveal in different ways. The differences in motive are actually key to each movie's themes. Richard Sanders as Jack Grief and Ed Bailey as Ray Hennessy aka The Hook in Lover's Lane. One of the major comparisons between Heart Eyes and Scream is the twist revealing that there are multiple killers, but Heart Eyes is far from the first movie since Scream to include a similar twist. In fact, Heart Eyes and Lover's Lane both reveal the same number of killers. In the case of Heart Eyes, this reveal makes a certain amount of sense to the story. David and Detective Shaw are both lovers with the same kink for violence, while Eli is their fanboy. In Lover's Lane, the twist is a bit more complicated. Ray Hennessy is technically the original Hook, but the other two killers have individual motivations that don't much relate to him. Chloe kills two people before targeting her ex-boyfriend as payback for dumping her, but her father Jack's motivations are more complex. It's hard to say if Jack even qualifies as a copycat killer since he's responsible for one of the killings on the night Ray was arrested. He's now fueled by a lustful obsession with his first victim's teenage daughter. The fact that later victims were also hooking up at Lover's Lane is more or less a coincidence. Heart Eyes and Lover's Lane swap the concepts of love and lust. Both can be dangerously unhealthy. Deidre Kilgore as Dee Dee and Carter Roy as Jimmy in Lover's Lane. The targeting of couples in Lover's Lane might often seem coincidental, but that's because of an interesting twist in what drives the killers. Although Heart Eyes never fully establishes why HEK targets couples, it's possible that David and Shaw simply prefer them because it reflects the fact that murder is a baked-in part of their marriage. But despite the sheer volume of Heart Eyes romance movie references, love has nothing to do with their actual motivation. They quite explicitly establish that killing is merely a sexual kink they share. By contrast, many of the couples targeted in Lover's Lane aren't even together romantically. One is having an affair, some are just hooking up, and protagonist Mandy is only at Lover's Lane because a guy bet a friend he could get some that night and convinced Mandy that she couldn't do any better. But while the couples aren't romantic, the killers are motivated by a twisted obsession they've confused with love. Chloe is lovelorn after watching her ex flirt with Anna Faris, and Jack's obsessed with Mandy because she looks exactly like her mother Harriet, his first victim. Ray's motives are the only potential outlier. He targets his victims' children after escaping, seemingly to get revenge for their surviving parents' role in his arrest, but his first killings remain more of a mystery. Jack states that Ray was also obsessed with Harriet, but the reveal that Jack was her actual killer renders this claim unreliable. It's also suggested in a therapy session that Ray envied couples at Lover's Lane because he felt unloved, but this claim once again comes from Jack. But for at least 2 out of 3 killers, the theme of twisted love stands strong. Devon Sawa and Anna Faris also share a bizarre acting connection, with a twist. They made opposite career moves in the exact same year. Anna Faris as Janelle and Erin Dean as Mandy in Lover's Lane. One of the more interesting contrasts between Heart Eyes and Lover's Lane is only evident from looking at the histories of the casts. Heart Eyes' Devon Sawa should be pretty well known to horror fans. He played multiple characters in the Child's Play television series Chucky, appeared with Bruce Campbell in the horror comedy Black Friday, and gained significant recognition in the horror community for starring in 2000's Final Destination. But the year before he became known for serious horror, he starred in the cult classic horror comedy Idle Hands. Interestingly, Lover's Lane's Anna Faris moved in the opposite direction at the same time. Not only was she shooting her role as cheerleader Janelle at the same time Sawa was appearing in Idle Hands, but the very next year she spoofed the genre in Scary Movie just a few months after Final Destination's release. That may not have too much to do with Heart Eyes or Lover's Lane in a thematic sense, but it's an interesting bit of trivia for those who appreciate both actors. Lover's Lane provides a perfect roadmap for future horror comedies like Heart Eyes. Older horror movies could be goldmines for comedy writers. Although Lover's Lane is generally a straightforward take on an old campfire tale and not a horror comedy, it's also a product of its time in several hilarious ways. It's hard not to laugh at moments like Janelle trying to clutch 3 knives at once to defend herself, or the incredible scene in which Half-Life's Michael Shapiro watches 2 teens lustily grind each other in the middle of a crowded restaurant. There's even a recurring bit that bizarrely suggests Ray's primary motivation for breaking out of confinement wasn't just revenge but also because he hated the food. The more laughable moments in indie horror moments like this could be promising now that talents like Heart Eyes,